The United States condemns, in the strongest possible terms, the DPRK's January 6th launch of an intermediate-range ballistic missile in direct violation of multiple Security Council resolutions. This launch, as well as each of the over 100 ballistic missile launches it has carried out since the beginning of 2022, is a flagrant violation of the UN Security Council's resolutions. Each test informs the DPRK of its capability gaps and allows Pyongyang to further advance its weapons programs. It is no mystery why the DPRK feels emboldened to carry out unlawful ballistic missile launches with impunity. For the past 2 years, Russia and China have muzzled this council from acting. In March, Russia ended the mandate of the 1718 Committee panel of experts through its capricious use of the veto. Russia and China also blocked a straightforward, factual press statement noting the DPRK's October ICBM launch had violated multiple Security Council resolutions. These actions coincide with Russia's and the DPRK's ongoing military cooperation in Russia's war against Ukraine, which violates both the UN Charter and arms restrictions established by this Council. Specifically, the two-way arms embargo on the DPRK laid out in resolutions 1718, 1874, and 2270 prohibit all UN member states from receiving arms, materiel, arms training, or assistance from, or providing them to, the DPRK. Colleagues, since December 2023, the DPRK has transferred over 20,000 shipping containers of munitions to date, containing at least 6 million heavy artillery rounds and well over 100 ballistic missiles to Russia for use against Ukraine. These missiles have subsequently been launched into Ukraine, impacting civilian infrastructure and populated areas, such as Kyiv and Zaporizhzhia. Russia has turned to the DPRK also now for manpower, as well as munitions, to carry out its war of aggression, welcoming more than 12,000 DPRK troops onto its soil. Since December of 2024, we have seen DPRK troops join in the fighting in Kursk, marking the first time they have participated in large-scale ground combat operations in more than 70 years, and the first time they have done so outside the Crimean Peninsula. It is also the first time since the Second World War that Russia has invited a foreign force on its territory for a military operation. In return for its support to Russia, Russia has transferred air defense systems to the DPRK. We are particularly concerned about Moscow's intent to share with Pyongyang satellite and space technologies, which are crucial to an army's communication and intelligence gathering capabilities on the modern battlefield, as we have seen in Ukraine. The DPRK is significantly benefiting from receiving Russian military equipment, technology, and experience, rendering it more capable of waging war against its neighbors. In turn, the DPRK will likely be eager to leverage these improvements to promote weapons sales and military training contracts globally. Mr. President, while we condemn the DPRK's actions, the United States remains committed to a diplomatic resolution to the challenges posed by the DPRK's unlawful WMD ballistic missile programs, WMD and ballistic missile programs. We urge the DPRK to return to the negotiating table and engage in meaningful dialogue. The United States looks forward to working with all members of the Security Council to address this critical issue. The Council must take seriously its responsibility to vigilantly monitor implementation of binding Security Council sanctions measures to counter the DPRK's threats to international peace and security. We must work together to press Russia and China to address the DPRK's unlawful ballistic missile launches and malicious cyber activities that threaten us all. We call on all Council members to support a united and clear denunciation of the DPRK's destabilizing behavior, and for all UN member states to fully and faithfully implement UNSCR obligations and work together to prevent the DPRK's procurement activities and revenue flows, supporting its unlawful WMD and ballistic missile programs. Colleagues, the United States is ready to work with the rest of the Security Council to expeditiously reinstate the 1718 Committee panel of experts that for 15 years provided public reporting that benefited all UN member states. Thank you.
Mr. President, the Republic of Korea condemns the DPRK in the strongest possible terms for its January 6th launch of a so-called hypersonic intermediate-range ballistic missile. This launch, following over 50 ballistic missile launches last year alone, constitutes a clear threat to international peace and security. It is yet another flagrant violation of multiple Security Council resolutions, which explicitly decided that DPRK shall not conduct any launches that use ballistic missile technology. Following the launch, the DPRK's state news agency, KCNA, highlighted Kim Jong-un's remarks that, I quote, "The hypersonic missile system can deal a serious military strike and will reliably contain any rivals in the Pacific region," end quote. Along with the toughest anti-U.S. counteraction announced by Pyongyang just 2 weeks ago, as well as the redefinition of the Republic of Korea as a hostile state declared 1 year earlier, these statements leave no room for doubt about North Korea's aggressive intentions. Mr. President, this launch also exemplifies a deeply troubling trend. The KCNA report detailed the use of a new composite carbon fiber material in the missile's engines, along with a new comprehensive and effective method for its flight and guidance systems. As stated even in Pyongyang's own report, this technology is, I quote, "by no means easy to achieve, and only a few countries in the world might possess such a weapon system," end quote. Indeed, the world's most isolated and impoverished regime under stringent Security Council sanctions is increasingly having an access to a high-end dual-use technology and material, as the DPRK is intensifying its illegal military cooperation with Russia. Russia has been repeatedly violating multiple Security Council resolutions, whereas all other members of the Council reaffirmed their commitment to the full implementation of Security Council resolutions. We are now particularly alarmed by the absence of the Security Council monitoring and the reporting mechanism on DPRK sanctions in the wake of Russia's dissolution of the 1718 Committee's panel of experts, and the possibility that Russia may even reverse its decades-long commitment to the denuclearization of North Korea. Russia, as a new nuclear weapon state and a permanent member of the Security Council, should clearly recognize that the DPRK is the first case in the 55-year history of the NPT regime to severely abuse and undermine its core principles. Mr. President, I would also like to draw your attention to the DPRK's appalling treatment of its own people. Since North Korean troops joined the illegal war waged by Russia, they have suffered significant losses. Unfamiliar with modern warfare and employing outdated human wave tactics, these soldiers were sitting ducks for drone attacks. My government assesses that there are at least 1,100 casualties. And then there is a report that the bereaved families of perished North Korean soldiers received nothing but death certificates and have been forced to remain silent. The North Korean authorities withheld details about where and how the soldiers died, only saying that they died while participating in sacred combat. The grieving family members were then compelled to sign non-disclosure agreements. These soldiers are essentially slaves to Kim Jong-un, brainwashed to sacrifice their lives on faraway battlefields to raise money for his regime and secure advanced military technology from Russia. This is why I repeatedly emphasize that we need to look at both nuclear and the human rights issues of DPRK simultaneously at the Security Council. The human rights situation in DPRK remains intrinsically linked to international peace and security. Mr. President and dear colleagues, the January 6th missile launch shows exactly where this blood money ends up. The DPRK sacrifices its own people to fuel its nuclear ambitions and further contributes to death and destruction in Ukraine. It must stop now. The soldiers' blood is crying out from the ground. This Council should speak with a united voice and act against the DPRK and Russia's illicit activities, and urge full and effective implementation of all relevant Security Council resolutions by all member states. If the Council remains unable or unwilling to stop and hold the DPRK accountable for persistently violating binding Security Council resolutions, egregiously abusing the NPT regime, and relentlessly pursuing aggressive and dangerous military adventures, the international community will eventually face an even greater menace. Then it will be too late for us to regret not having done what we ought to do now. I thank you.
Господин председатель,
Thank you, Mr. President.
в своем участии
Participation in today's meeting of the permanent representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We listened to the briefing delivered by the Assistant Secretary General Khalid Tiari. We regret the fact that once again we have not heard there any comprehensive analysis of the situation on the Korean Peninsula, nor any constructive proposal to redress this, nor balanced objective assessments as is stipulated in Article 100 of the Charter of the United Nations. Time and again, convening a meeting on each missile launch by the DPRK, Western delegations reiterate the same old points, pinning full responsibility on Pyongyang, whereas the military provocations undertaken by Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo are obstinately overlooked. As was the past, as is in the past, those who initiated this meeting intend to create a negative information backdrop regarding the DPRK. They are looking to keep obsolete sanctions measures afloat and to justify aggressive steps undertaken by the U.S. and allies in the region. Consider this: the Security Council, with its unique mandate for the maintenance of peace and security, is being used not to develop sound political solutions, but rather it is being used as an instrument for propaganda and political score settling. This is not what the founders of the United Nations would have wished to see, and this is not what the international community expects from the Security Council today. Against this backdrop, the statements of certain members of the Security Council in this hall about the concern for the plight and the fate of the North Koreans and their desire to see a prosperous DPRK with a happy population appear to be uniquely hypocritical. You are dreaming about muzzling the population, and you have been muzzling them and asphyxiating them over the course of many years already. And against this backdrop, the DPRK leadership has a full right to implement measures to ensure their security and to uphold the sovereignty of the country. We note that the statement by the leader of the country, Kim Jong-un, which incidentally, whose birthday is today, we congratulate our North Korean friends on his birthday. In the statement by the leader of the country following the launch of the hypersonic missile on 6 January, refers to the fact that the shoring up of DPRK's military capabilities is geared towards enhancing the self-defense of the country rather than and not carrying out any offensive operations whatsoever. Mr. President, the imminent departure from the White House of the Biden administration is a good opportunity to consider the results of its 4 years policy in the Korean Peninsula. The results will be unnerving. The conflict between the North and South has reached staggering levels, including at the constitutional and institutional levels.
Dialogue at the highest level has been frozen. Without any visible prospects for resumption, the peninsula remains to be the target of large-scale militarization with the use of U.S. military capabilities. There's a bloc-based mindset that now prevails in the region, which is driving a deep wedge between neighboring states, a stark manifestation of the aggressive policy undertaken by Pyongyang's adversaries has recently been joint military exercises near the borders of the DPRK. They've evolved from one-off joint maneuvers in response to missile launches, evolved into regular large-scale operations with the involvement of aircraft carriers, destroyers, bombers, and latest generation fighter jets of 3 countries. Regardless of those who are provoking instability in the region from Washington, Tokyo, and Seoul may state, one thing is clear. The Security Council resolutions on Korean settlement stipulate that issues in the peninsula need to be resolved exclusively through peaceful, diplomatic, and political means. And this means that their practice of pumping weapons into the region and participation in the increased frequency of military maneuvers is nothing other than systematic violations of international law. Once again today, we have heard their mantra that apparently they did not provoke anything, they're not provoking anything, but this is not true. The fact is that this planned policy will later be casually mentioned and acknowledged in an interview by a U.S. official just a few days ago, Antony Blinken, who compelled all parties to speak of the unprovoked nature of the Russian special military operation, announced that the United States had been pumping weapons into Ukraine long before its start. The statement of the outgoing U.S. Secretary of State on the transfer to the DPRK of Russian satellite and space technologies made by him during a visit to Seoul on 6 January, which was repeated today by a number of delegations, is wholly unsubstantiated. Such statements are the latest example of baseless conjecture, which is geared towards smearing bilateral cooperation between the Russian Federation and the friendly nation of the DPRK. The agreement on strategic partnership between Russia and the DPRK, which was recently ratified by our country, has an Article 4, whereby states support one another in the event of an armed attack on one of the parties. All measures that could be undertaken under this article are an internal matter related to Russian-North Korean bilateral relations. Cooperation between Russia and the DPRK is designed to play a stabilizing role in the region on the basis of the principle of indivisibility of security to reduce the risk of relapse into war in the peninsula, including with the use of nuclear means, and to become one of the components of a robust security architecture in the region. Mr. President, we regret that our long-standing friends and partners in Seoul are quickly losing their independence under pressure from Washington. They have embraced the path of blindly yielding to U.S. interests, and by doing so, they are depriving themselves of an opportunity to restore peace and trust in the region. In recent weeks, the situation in the Republic of Korea itself is becoming a factor of instability, which is liable to spark an armed escalation, as has become clear from leaks in the media. The current leadership of the country deliberately sought to provoke a sharp escalation of tensions on the peninsula in order to shore up their own internal political positions. To that end, drones were sent in the direction of the DPRK with the aim of provoking a harsh reaction from Pyongyang. If this is indeed the case, then Seoul's actions are a source of great concern. To conclude, we wish to note that if those who initiated today's meeting genuinely wish to end the dangerous impasse, rather than further escalating tensions, they would be well advised to fundamentally reconsider their approaches. The path to normalization lies through forging mutually respectful dialogue, ensuring security guarantees, and abandoning the logic of collective punishment through sanctions. The relevant proposals were repeatedly set out by the Russian Federation and China at the Security Council. The United States continues to respond to such initiatives with a flat refusal. However, the failed policy of the West on the Korean Peninsula reaffirms the fact that there are no real alternatives to this. And the sooner this understanding prevails at the Security Council, the sooner it will be in a position to favorably influence developments in the region. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation, and I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I thank ASG Chiari for his briefing and welcome the PRs of the DPRK and Japan to the meeting today. China has taken note of the recent launch and relevant statements by the DPRK and the reactions of relevant parties. The current complex and delicate situation on the Korean Peninsula and its highly unstable and uncertain future trajectory are a source of worry for international community as a whole. Despite different policies and propositions of parties on the issue of Korean Peninsula, maintaining peace and stability and preventing war and chaos there serve the interests of all, and thus should become the common goal. Under the current circumstances, China once concerned to focus on the greater good and make joint efforts to maintain peace and stability on the peninsula and to advance political settlement to the issue. First is to take legitimate security concerns of regional countries seriously. As a vestige of the Cold War, the issue of Korean Peninsula has dragged on for decades with repeated ups and downs. It is essentially a security issue, with the crux being the long-standing absence of peace mechanism. To end the security conundrum and realize a comprehensive and lasting solution to the issue, it is necessary to tackle both the symptoms and the root causes, transition from armistice to a peace mechanism, pay attention to the legitimate security concerns of all regional countries, and push for a balanced, effective, and sustainable security architecture. The dual-track approach and the principle of phased and synchronized steps proposed by China are an effective way to advance political settlement and realize lasting peace and security on the peninsula. Second, Cold War mentality and the practice of deterrence and exerting pressure. Recent years have witnessed spiraling confrontations on the peninsula. The U.S. has incorporated the peninsula into its Indo-Pacific strategy, being bent on strengthening military alliances, increasing deterrence and pressure, and provoking bloc confrontation. In particular, it has increased substantially its military presence on the peninsula and the neighborhood and gone so far as to introduce strategic assets, including intermediate-range missiles, into the region, gravely undermining the strategic security interests of regional countries, including China. Such an approach is counterproductive to resolving the issue. Rather, will only further intensify disputes and tensions in a total departure from the goal of maintaining peace and stability on the peninsula and promoting a political solution. Thus, China firmly opposes it. Third is to promote dialogue, consultation, and diplomatic negotiations. Since the 1990s, many glimmers of hope for a political solution to the issue of peninsula have emerged, but only to be reversed and dashed by a certain country's policy swings. Relevant parties should draw lessons from history and make a comprehensive, accurate assessment of the current situation on the peninsula, and based on such an assessment, adopt a rational attitude, display mutual goodwill, take concrete actions, and show flexibility to work and create conditions for dialogue, consultation, and a political settlement. President, in his statement just now, the U.S. representative distorted and smeared China, which we firmly oppose and will never accept. For years, China has adopted a prudent, responsible, and constructive attitude, has always made judgments and enacted policies based on the issues bets on merits of the issue itself, and has always been committed to taking practical actions to maintain peace and stability on the peninsula, ease the situation there. China's sincerity, efforts, and contribution allows no questioning, distortion, or repudiation. In conclusion, I would like to underscore that in addressing this issue, the starting point and goal of the Security Council should be to advance the political settlement to the issue, rather than just to make accusations or exert pressure, much less to allow itself to be reduced to a tool of a certain country for its political self-interests. As a permanent member of the Security Council, China has always conscientiously implemented all DPRK-related resolutions and fulfilled its due international obligations. Meanwhile, as a close neighbor of the peninsula and a responsible major country, China has always been playing a constructive role in its own way in promoting political settlement, maintaining peace and stability on the peninsula, and achieving long-term peace and stability in Northeast Asia. We call on all parties concerned to work together with China to that end. I thank you.
I now give the floor to the representative of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The right to self-defense is the fundamental cornerstone that guarantees the existence and development of the state and main core of the national sovereignty. It is exactly for this reason that the UN Charter and the other international law stipulate that all UN member states have equal right to self-defense, regardless of the size of the territory and population, as well as level of development. I strongly denounce and categorically reject yet another unfair and abnormal practice at the UN Security Council, dealing unjustly with legitimate and just exercise of the sovereign right of the DPRK at the precondition request of the United States is the following forces. As stated earlier, a test fire of the new type, the intermediate-range hypersonic ballistic missile, is a part of the plan for development of national defense capability to enhance sustainability and effectiveness of the strategic deterrence in conformity with changing security environment of the region. As such, it has no slightest negative impact on security of a neighboring country. Even today, when the civilian death toll exceeded 45,000 in Gaza, United States embellished Israel's nefarious mass killing atrocity as the right to self-defense, arousing public indignation of the international community. Meanwhile, it takes the issue with legitimate exercise of the right to self-defense of the DPRK. It itself is an extreme manifestation of double standard and the mockery and disregard of the UN Charter. The anti-DPRK military confrontation moves of the United States and its following forces in and around the Korean Peninsula have reached their limits, unprecedented in their reckless, provocative, and dangerous nature. As US-ROK alliance have today evolved into nuclear-based military bloc and military nuclear war alliance, their nuclear blackmail and threat against DPRK have been actualized and maximized as never before. Besides, United States brings in even a NATO member states to conduct large-scale joint military exercise of various kinds and types around Korean Peninsula. As a result, US-led military threat is escalating to the global scale, covering Europe and Asia-Pacific, and its main spearhead is turning exactly to the DPRK. The development, the test, manufacture, and position of the weapon system required by DPRK to highly advance national war deterrence are just the exercise of the inalienable right to self-defense inherent to the sovereign state in the face of the prevailing changing security environment of the Korean Peninsula and potential threat. It is absolute guarantee for safeguarding peace and stability of the region. The UN Security Council, whose primary mission is to maintain peace and security of the world, picked hold each time and every time on the just exercise of the sovereign right of DPRK, all while keeping silence on heinous military moves of the United States, its foreign countries, who disturb the peace and stability of the region. We take this opportunity to warn against it in strongest terms. Should grave situation of the physical conflict that no one desires is created on Korean Peninsula due to reckless war mania kicked up by United States and ROK, UN Security Council should be held accountable for criminalizing the just exercise of the sovereign right of DPRK by applying extreme prejudice and double standard and for giving impunity to maneuver of the war provocation of the United States and ROK. The UN arena, the platform of the impartiality and equality, have instead changed today as a channel of the anti-DPRK confrontation by United States and a handful of the hostile forces. This worrisome reality brings home to us immutable truth that we have no right to step back even an inch from the justice we have chosen in order to defend the sovereignty and the right to existence and development. The Comrade Kim Jong-un, President of State Affairs of the DPRK, said the efforts of the possess strong military capability should be natural, self-defense and mandatory right and core state policy, which a sovereign state should not fail to pursue in both the peaceful and confrontational environment. The destruction of the balance of power between friends and foe immediately means the war. The peace ensured by strong power can be genuine and durable. It is a lesson learned and truth verified by history and reality. The peace is not defended in words. The UN Security Council is not a solo stage of the United States. If the United States is following forces that continue to abuse UN Security Council as a tool for realizing their unlawful political goals, the DPRK will safeguard its sovereign rights and interests with more resolute and decisive response. The DPRK will in the future too continue to exercise the sovereign right of the states and reliably safeguard regional and global peace and security as a responsible nuclear weapon state. I